In one of my recent videos, we did a pattern called Bunzo, and I turned it into some little worms, as I called them, and we just tried to have some fun with that in the midst of our other Tangle pattern as well. But I just had the urge to draw another composition with that same pattern, that same Tangle pattern, Bunzo, but I'm going to use it in a more standardized or traditional fashion. So what I've done here is I've just divided my tile up into into 9 squares, but basically 3 sections this way and 3 sections this way. Just helps me identify some key points for composition in the tile itself. And I've also decided to use a blue gel pen today, which is kind of unusual for me. I do like using the black pens, but I'm just going to start with this and just kind of see where the details go. So I'm going to start with Bunzo and do my little shape here. And the regular Bunzo shape is much more fan oriented, meaning it reminds me of an expanding fan as it goes outward. It gets larger and larger. That's at least the sort of default way that I've seen this pattern used. Certainly, as we learned the other day, not the only way, but it is a key way that people learn this shape. So I'm going to make use of that and accentuate that growing larger as it moves outward. And you can see I'm just drawing simple curved lines that connect or tether on the side and working outward from there. So starting with the small one and just making these shapes move outward. And I'm also doing a little different than I did the other day. This one I'm laying down the pattern that I want to use first, and then I'll do the inking with the filling in of the various bands that create the Bunzo shape here. I'm not really trying to create a flower here, but I could see where someone might think that that's what's happening. But I'm just wanting this sort of expanding pattern. And so now I just ink in these details, and I'm going to leave the center one white, a little different than I did the other day. So I'll start with the next one, and I'm going to just ink this in. Now these gel pens are a little less precise and a little muddier than my typical Sakura fine liner pens. They just don't have quite the precision. Even though they're a very fine point, the ink is a little messier. It smears a bit more easily. So it's just something to be aware of when you work with different tools. You have to kind of know what's going to be happening there. But I just thought a blue appearance on this white tile might kind of have a neat look. So that's just what I'm doing here. And I do want to end each piece with a dark ring. So if I have to, I'm going to expand that outward, just based on the number of rings that I did there. And this is just because of what I want to put behind this. I want to be able to have ample contrast. So I don't want to have it end on a white or a light area, since I'll be doing something lighter in the background as well. I kind of got this one a little weird shape there unintentionally, just the way the paper caught my pen. I'll blame it on the paper. How about that? The other day I blamed it on my pen. Today I'll blame it on my paper. Not really, of course. Just was a little hiccup there as I moved my pen across the paper. And if you remember, what I'm doing with this white spot is just by avoiding adding ink there in that central piece, I can give the impression of a light reflection that helps to give this shape more form. And then if we add our shading around the edges, it's going to accentuate that even further. And this is something I have not planned. I didn't pre-draw this or anything to see how it would work out, but I do have an idea in my mind that I thought might look interesting. So we'll see if that's the case. I'll let you folks be the judge when it's all done. Our next pattern that we're going to now add is called walk the line. At least that's the basis for what we're doing. And there are variables of it. It can be done in literally in a line. It can be done with spirals. It can be done with circles and all sorts of things. I'm going to use a sort of fan version of it, much like we've done here, but we're going to just expand outward. So what I'm going to do is create a wavy line, an unplanned line here. And then I'm going to go out a little bit and create a larger wavy unplanned line. And one more again. Now we'll do a few more of these in different areas, but I'll show you how this pattern works. So now that we've created this area that we're going to work in, we're going to draw some lines that will start sort of at the center of what we might imagine that piece is, and they come outward. Just lines. Straight lines. You can vary a little bit the shape or distance between them, but we just want to fill that spot. And so now I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to make these kind of wider as they go out. I think this will have a better result when you see what we're doing here in a moment. Just kind of following this pattern around here. They don't all have to come from the center, as you can see plainly here. And now we'll do something similar here, and you might even want to start more in the center and work your way out and around. Just making all these lines Okay, now that we have that, I'm going to do the next part. We're going to make little curves, just like we do when we do a rounding. We're going to round the end of each of these pieces, and my gel pen is going to make this a little challenging because it's very inky, very wet, and it wants to smear all over. But we're going to round these little areas that we've created and connect to those lines that we drew, and it completely is going to alter the appearance of these shapes. We'll do the same thing to all of these. I'm just starting at these lines, or going to those lines, depending on where I start, and shading it in, inking that in rather, to create this different rounded appearance on these areas that we've separated with our lines. And mine is, like I said, it's a little goopy because of this pen. It gets really glunky, but the ink goes on very nice and smooth. That is a pleasant sensation with the drawing process. I do like that. Whoops. And you can vary the amount of the top that you cut off. You can just barely slice that off, so to speak, when you're inking it. Or you can make it where there's a big amount of ink there and you shorten that piece. But you just do want to follow those outer contours to have the effect that we're looking for here. Alright, so we've got our first walk the line pattern in place, and let's see where we might want another one. I think I'm going to put one right over here, but I'm going to have it partially go behind this first one, and we can alter our shapes there in the background as well and do whatever we'd like with it. Bring that one around just like that, and now again we bring our lines out, in some interesting way that follows that line. Now we'll repeat that same process with our inking by rounding those ends. I think maybe just a smaller one up here would be nice. We'll just do a little two looper there, but let's also then create one over here. I'm going to have it go in this direction. Like that. So now we'll do those, and I think we're going to be at an end here on this particular pattern. Alright, our last little line here of walk the line. So there's our basic tile here. And I think what I'll do, just as a sort of a bringing it all together before I do the shading, I'm going to create an aura that follows the entire outside of the design all the way around the entire thing. That way, if I choose to add a little drop shadow behind it or something, it'll give a separation from the pattern itself, and it just helps that shadow to look a little more like we want it to. Looks like the ink has dried, so we're going to begin our shading. And the first thing I want to do, I'm going to start in the center and work outward. I'm going to shade the Bunzos by adding some of the pencil or graphite here in the valleys, so to speak, where these pieces come together. In other words, on the outside edges of each Bunzo piece. And by doing that, we're going to create a nice rounded shape. Now, I used some nice graphite when I did this, but I don't think it's as dark as I want it to be in those inner pieces there. I want it to really look like a little valley down in there where the shadows are really at play. So I'm going to grab a darker pencil. I think because it's blue ink and not black ink, some of that natural darkness that would normally be there with a black pen is lost. And when I blend the graphite, it just sort of gets washed out looking a little bit. So, which sometimes you want a light shadow, but in this case I want that to be nice and dark down in there. So I'm just using one of my Mars Lumograph black. I'm using a 6B to just add some darkness in those areas. Really getting some glare on the camera here, I see too, so I'll move it here in a moment so that you can see it hopefully better and get a better perception of how that is changing these patterns here. Let's take a look. So it's really hard. Let me turn off one of these other lights here. That helps a little bit, but graphite is just so darn shiny that it's unavoidable that that's going to happen with the lights anyway. I think if you're viewing this without the shadow, it looks much better. But let's see, I'll turn that back on just for drawing's sake. I'm going to go around these edges of the Bunzos to separate them from that background a little bit. So wherever those patterns overlap, that's where I'm laying down some of the graphite here. That looks a little better there. Let's also then expand outward, and we're going to add a small amount of shadow behind each of these layers that we did with the walk the line pattern, just to create another sense of depth, because we see these pieces, but right now they look flat. They look like they're just all one piece. But by adding this bit of shadow behind them, behind each segment, we're going to create a layered effect. They'll look like they're right on top of each other or underneath each other, depending which way you're referring to it. Let's blend this out here and we'll see just a nice hint. Now these don't have to be as dark as I wanted those other ones to be, because these aren't necessarily deep crevices that I was trying to accentuate like on the Bunzo pieces here. This is just a dividing shadow that we're using to create a depth and layering effect. And that's all we're really going for. So, and it doesn't have to be super dark. Just enough to give that sense. Alright. That looks good, so we'll continue on here doing the same thing with these other portions. Alright, now what I'm going to do too, since we've got a lot of white space, I'm going to add some shadow on the outside. I wondered if we would, and I think that is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do it all the way around the drawing, but I am going to add some on this lower right hand side basically, or this right hand side here as well. Now let's turn off our bright lights here and see if we can see that any better. I think that works, and we will call this drawing finished. Well, thank you very much, as always, for joining with me here today. I appreciate it very, very much. I hope that you enjoyed the process following along, and hopefully you were able to draw your own piece of art as well. I look forward to seeing everyone again real soon back here in the Tangles and Tunes channel. And until then, take care. Bye-bye now.